Most American school children today are taught something along the lines of the unique contribution of America to world history was the invention of slavery. Of course, this isn't true. Of course, until the modern age, slavery had been a fixture of human civilization literally everywhere. Yet it is taught to our children as a reason that we must be distinctly ashamed of our country. Today, we'll discuss the history of slavery, both in general, throughout human history, and in the history of the United States, and seek to bring clarity to a subject that is used to justify the wholesale eradication of our nation. We'll do it live!
The American Revolution, in other words, is never finished. It must always be renewed.
Greater love than this hath no man, than that he lay down his life for his friend.
What if it's not envy?
We must take back our cities, and take back our culture, and take back our country. God bless you, and God bless America.
So, to start things off, my question is, why slavery? Wasn't it eradicated hundreds of years ago? Why are we even talking about it in 2026?
Yeah, why are we talking about it? Well, I mean, it's used as, like I said in the introduction, it's used as a battering ram to tear down civilization.
Yeah.
Right. That because it happened, because it happened in America, therefore we should not exist anymore. Right. That's more or less the calculus that's used. And you see this during the reckoning of 2020, the great awakening of 2020. You had statues torn down, not just of like Confederate generals and things like that, but you had statues like Teddy Roosevelt or American figures that were like actually opposed to slavery. I think like Abraham Lincoln statues were vandalized for whatever reason. Basically anything historically American was attacked, and it was over racial grievances. And so this issue is a constant one, and it's constant because it is used as this moral linchpin behind why our civilization is terrible and nasty and horrible and must be destroyed.
Let's get something out of the way real quick, because this is always the problem, right? When we talk about slavery,
this issue,
it's always like, oh, so you guys are okay with slavery.
Oh, you must be slavery apologists.
Yeah, that's how it always is. So that's not what we're saying, obviously.
No, it's not. And we can be, really, really clear that I am glad that it is gone. I do not want to own slaves. I don't want to be a slave. All right. I wouldn't want to own another human being. And that I'm not going to make an apologia and say, oh, well, it actually should have still existed, or we should still have it, or it was actually good when we did have it, or something like that. And usually that's how people will try to frame anything that's said, right? Anything that tries to approach this topic with appropriate historical depth and breadth. And like that is what people will seek to do every single time. So no, we are not pro-slavery in any way, shape, or form. Anything that we say hereafter that would be taken out of context after this statement is probably legally actionable as actual malice. So bear that in mind. Anyone who might want to clip anything that we say, we are not pro-slavery at all whatsoever. So don't even try it. Yeah, C.J. has impressive lawyers. Look out.
The Gary Law.
Gary, attorney at law, LLC. So anyway.
I'm gonna make my nose bleed again. I've had a nose bleeding problem all day. Yeah, but like I think what we wanted to do was
stop doing cocaine.
I should. Can you stop doing it if you've never done it? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Anyway,
we'll leave that for part 2.
Yeah.
I think the slavery conversation, the thing that has to be remembered is just the fact that we're able to look at slavery as something morally questionable, I think is a unique moment in history. I think that's one of the things that we talked to, because we discussed how we should handle this. And I think that slavery was so built into the human experience that it would be unimaginable for people to have a conversation about whether slavery was good or bad. It's like asking if the government is good or bad, or property is good or bad. It's just so built into the way that humans used to think that
or breathing, or having a family, or drinking water.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fundamental to human existence.
in fact,
for all
if,
of history.
if there's something that makes America not unique at all, it's that we had slavery, because every other
Yeah.
country, every other civilization, every other people group were both enslaved and held slaves. I mean,
Yeah.
across thousands of years. I mean, this was a human historical norm. So, I mean, this is one of the reasons we want to make this point, is that it is not our original sin as Americans.
No.
And we are not unique for having it. But in fact, we inherited something that had been around for thousands of years, and it only came to a conversation in the Anglosphere, in the Anglo-American experience, in the 18th, 19th century. I mean, it's a very recent phenomenon.
Yeah.
And America, in England, in Europe, actually led the way in ending that paradigm.
Yeah, most people don't approach this topic or this question with any historical consciousness whatsoever. I mean, this is why. I mean, it might seem like hyperbole, what I said in the beginning, that American school children are taught that Americans, like particularly white European heritage Americans, that's who invented slavery. It didn't exist in human history before that until Europeans went to Africa and loaded black people on ships. Right, there had never been slavery ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And like within the public consciousness, that is something that a significant number of people in the country believe.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, today. Like if you just want, man on the street interview, Jay Leno style, ask people who invented slavery, they would be like, well, white people did.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that's what people believe today. And that's what's been taught to them. That is what popular culture has taught them. They don't have any idea that throughout the Middle Ages, Europe had slavery. It was transitioned or transformed into something like serfhood or serfdom. But nevertheless, like those people, like the peasantry, like they're bound to the land and they're working the land as quasi slaves. And even throughout the Middle Ages, there's constantly raids and wars that happen where people are taken captive as slaves, and certainly before that. And this is just like focused on Europe. Before that, in the ancient world, right, every great empire, every large kingdom, even small tribal arrangements, they all had slaves,
Mm-hmm.
all of them. And every part of the world, right, sub-Saharan Africa had slavery from time immemorial. Right, they had always, well before contact with Europeans, been enslaving one another, capturing one another as slaves. The Americas had slavery. The native tribes to the Americas had lots and lots and lots of slavery. Asia had slavery. Everywhere had it. Right. This isn't something unique to Europeans. It isn't something unique to Americans. It was a universal in human history for millennia. And so, yeah, the fact that you bring up that, in the 18th and 19th century, right, people began asking the question, well, what if we, just didn't do that anymore?
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because one of the things that came up in our conversation is the reason they were able to even conceive of not having slavery was actually because of technological and economic development.
That's right.
It wasn't, because before that, they couldn't have even figured out, how do we handle production without slavery? There's so many people that they all need to be fed. And so this is just part of the institutional superstructure of civilization itself. And it was actually because of technology and economic improvements that slavery was even called into question. So at first, it wasn't even possible. It wasn't even politically or economically possible to end slavery.
To at least conceptualize a world in which it wouldn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the reasons that European civilization did away with it is because they had succeeded in creating a wealthier society than prior epochs.
Yeah.
So,
and you could begin to like even ask that question.
Yeah.
Of what if we had a civilization without holding people in bondage?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, okay. So let's step back then. So, biblically speaking, this is always where we need to go to, because we really misunderstand the way that scripture treats things like this. And I think a lot of it comes from our individualism today.
Yeah.
And we just went through a whole reading on individual ethics.
That's right.
And our conception of ethics has, it's always abstract and situationless and contextless. But if you look at the Bible, when God approaches people like Abraham, when he approaches people like Job, when he approaches these powerful people in the Old Testament, he just assumes, because that's how society was structured, that slavery was a given. And not once does God reprimand Abraham or Isaac or Jacob or any of these others for having servants or slaves in this way. Why is that? Why doesn't God, why doesn't he do that? Maybe talk about the biblical side of this for a couple minutes.
It's obviously incredibly controversial to talk about these things, or even to discuss them, because it looks like you're saying, well, God is giving his endorsement to holding people captive or holding them as slaves. But then again, right, the development of human civilization is one where, you see it from like the very earliest periods in the Bible, and like, for instance, you bring up Abraham, right, having his servants, and of course, a lot of people make a lot of hay with it. Well, no, these were like hired people. They were not, slaves. And it's like, now almost certainly are, an owned part of the household. And it's also interesting that when Abraham is called by God to take the covenant sign of circumcision, it isn't just him and his son Ishmael that take it. It's all of the men in the household that are both slave and free.
Well, because it had a very patrimonial view of slavery, where they were part of the household, and so that had implications for how a master was supposed to treat his servants or his slaves. So when we think of slaves, images are conjured up that include whippings and like sort of that root style thing. But obviously, God treats slavery as a human given, but he also has moral expectations for how a master and slave should relate to one another.
Yeah, those moral expectations are elucidated in the New Testament by the Apostle Paul. That also is an interesting subject I think we can get to in a moment. But just even looking at the history of it, like, Israel is kept in bondage in Egypt, and it's brutal. It is, one of the major themes of Exodus, we've been going through it in church, is that the slavery that they're under in Egypt, there is no Sabbath, right? There is no rest. There is only service to this godlike king, the Pharaoh. And the people are asking to go into the wilderness and celebrate a feast to their God, to serve their God instead of Pharaoh. And their God is giving them rest, giving them Sabbath. And so there's a distinction there, like a qualitative distinction between, right, the kind of slavery of Israel to God and slavery to Pharaoh. And even then, when they're liberated, when God liberates the Israelites from Egypt, and gives them a law for how they are to live in the land, right? The specific law for them regarding their conduct as the priestly people in the land, right? He doesn't say, all right, nope, you were slaves in Egypt, so now no, slavery is abolished and eradicated. What does he do? He defines precise limits for what they can do, right? They can't hold their brothers as slaves beyond 6 years. In the 7th year, they have to go free. But foreign slaves, it's different. People that you capture in warfare, for instance, those don't go free. Nevertheless, you're to treat them well, and that the laws apply to them in the same manner that they apply to everyone else, right? Which is very much a revolutionary sort of concept. because like the rest of the ancient world, slaves are not treated as human beings.
Yeah.
Right? They're literally just property. You can do whatever if you. I mean, like looking at the Roman laws much later, thousands of years later, we only know about the Roman laws, or you could look at like Hammurabi's code. They don't really have rights, at least the earlier iterations of Roman law. But you could kill them if you wanted to. You could do whatever you wanted to the women, like things like that, like very sick, dark stuff. Right? Israel's not allowed to do any of those things.
Well, no, I was just going to say, here's why we're having this particular discussion, because the secular morality, and by the way, like today's like postmodern or modernist morality is not subjectivist at all, right? They do have standards. And one of their standards is if you have forebearers who own slaves, you inherited their sin, right? This is kind of like the way the morality operates.
Yeah.
But the way we're having this biblical conversation is because that's not how the Bible treats it at all.
No.
Slavery in and of itself has never been designated by God as sin. Now, is this something that we endorse? No.
Or they think it's good. Like nevertheless, it's good.
But we need to learn from the way
Yeah.
we need to learn from the way the Bible talks about it, and we can replicate that in talking about our forebears, especially here in America. And we should have this ability to free ourselves from this guilt manipulation that's weaponized against us on behalf of the liquidation of our heritage, because that's exactly the whole point. The public morality of 2026, of the entire latter half of the 20th century, is not subjectivist. They have these absolute standards, and they want you to know that this original sin that's part of our national DNA or whatever, we did inherit that.
Yeah, I think
it's very theological in the way that they treat us because of that.
Yeah. They have a very distinct public morality, a public theology regarding it. And I think it's important for Christians to look at that. The people that are like, yeah, you bear the stain of slavery because you're white, even though like, yeah, my ancestors, didn't actually, like, I've mentioned this before, like at least my paternal ancestors, there's none of them listed in the Civil War registry. We came in 1870. And so we're not part of the 48ers, the German communists that came over. Get that out of the way. But nevertheless, like we never held my paternal heritage, at least in America, maybe thousands of years ago in like tribal, Germanic situation, probably, obviously. But within the American context, never had any slaves. Yet I'm told, because of the color of my skin, I bear this stain of slaveholding. And even if I did, but right, exactly, even if I did, even if we did fight in the Civil War on the side of the Confederacy or something, I don't. I don't. And not only that, I think one thing that we should get out of the way is, right, the people that most stridently hold to this, right, another fixture of their morality is like they can cut off the genitals of little boys.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like the same people telling you, like, yeah, we want to take your kids away and cut off your son's testicles, are the same ones saying, well, you bear a stain of the worst sin ever imaginable because of slavery, because you're white. Right. Like you should just like dismiss anybody out of hand that is like pro trans and pro all the, all the insanity, all of the insane woke stuff. Right. Any other moral, like, high ground that they try to hold that might actually appeal to you instinctively, you should just dismiss it. You should just think, these people are nuts. I don't care what they think. They're evil. But that being said, right, well, it's simply not true. Like, I mean, if you actually care about what the Bible teaches and what the Bible says, then like, you have to take it seriously. Seriously, what the Bible actually says, not what modern post 20th century woke morality says, what the Bible actually says.
Yeah.
And that's admittedly an incredibly hard thing to do, because the entire world is telling you that this is the original sin of white people.
Yeah.
and you should feel guilty.
Yeah. So the conservative response to all this is that today's people should not feel like they are burdening the sins of their forebears. But what we're actually arguing is the existence of slavery itself is not a sin. Now, mistreating a slave, that would be sinful, you know?
Yeah.
So, but what we're arguing is that you have to get your definition of sin from the Bible. And when you look into that, you realize that slavery as part of the human existence is not something that morally indicts individuals. Like Abraham was not sinning when he had these.
Yeah. I mean, there
slaves.
probably are people that think like if not only probably, I know there are people who believe that if you ever owned a slave,
right,
you are going to hell,
and that's what we're pushing back against.
Yeah, and it's like no, or like the popular one within like the Reformed subculture is like, well, did you know that Jonathan Edwards in Puritan New England, he owns slaves? So you should discount everything that he said. He's in hell.
Mm-hmm.
Right now. Like, that was the very popular one like a decade ago. I mean, it still probably is.
Yeah.
That he's in hell now because he owns slaves. Right. Like they don't believe anybody else is in hell. Right. Like, yeah, like, hey, like Gandhi's in hell, man. What? How dare you say that? Like it's basically only Hitler and people that own slaves that are in hell. Mm-hmm. Within their morale. Like for real, that's the only people that could ever go to hell are slave owners and Nazis, mm-hmm. right? Like because that is the morality that Nazi Germany and the Confederacy are unequivocally evil, and all of them, are in hell now. Mm-hmm. And like those are the only two enemies we've ever had in American history. That's the popular woke history of the world. And so like looking at it, biblically is not a popular thing because you're going to be branded as slavery apologist and pro-slavery and things like that. But it's like, well, it says what it says and it doesn't say what it doesn't say. Right. And it's also, of endless fascination to me that, again, right, talking about the Roman world in the 1st century AD, there were millions of slaves in the Roman Empire, including slaves throughout Judea, right? Especially the wealthier classes, obviously, are the ones that would own slaves, and like the chief priests and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all of the rich, powerful people in 1st century Judea, they owned slaves, almost certainly, right? And not only almost certainly, the scene in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Peter cuts off the ear of Malchus, most of our translations, because they like to soften things and make the Bible seem nice and warm and cozy, says the servant of the high priest. Well, the word there is doulos, mm-hmm. right? That means slave. Yeah. Right. He's a slave of the high priest. And of course, like the imagery, his ear gets cut off. Right. He is a stand-in for the high priest. If you're missing an ear or you have any kind of deformity, you can't be the high priest anymore. Jesus heals his ear, and tells Peter to put his sword away, that those who live by the sword die by the sword, and so forth. But like that tiny little indication that there totally was slavery practiced by the Jews in Israel in the 1st century. And so you think about the Gospels and you think about all of the prophetic denunciations that Jesus made of the leadership of Israel, of the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Again, these are guys that almost certainly own slaves. Never once does he say, and by the way, you all own slaves. You need to let them free. Mm-hmm. Not once. Now, did he say it and wasn't recorded in scripture or something? Like people maybe make that argument. But right, what is in scripture is in scripture. Yeah. Right.
Well, the reason is because again, God, he treats it as a given. It's part of human life. It's part of civilizations, and it's not something that he was ever on record in a moral crusade against.
Well, and like God never throughout the Bible, right? The thing that he is doing, and this is, I mean, this is just an overall broad like perspective of Scripture in general, is human society and humanity in general is on a pathway to maturity and wisdom. That's what the Bible is showing, and like within the Old Testament, the focus, of course, is on Israel, and the point for them is they're being led into greater and greater maturity, greater and greater ability to govern, to lead, to have wisdom, and the way you reach that is not doing revolution, not through radicalism, not through re-engineering society, right? That's not the way that you achieve maturity. Whether as an individual or whether at scale, civilization wide, and so, right, that's why it doesn't appear there, right? That's why it doesn't happen in the ancient world, because humanity is not capable of that yet. I mean, it took nearly 2,000 years of Christianization or well, at least 1,500 years of it for slavery to more or less be eradicated in Europe, where I mean, fairly early on, the church is like, no, you shouldn't hold fellow Christians as slaves. That's a bad idea. You shouldn't be doing that. But that took like 1,000 years.
Yeah.
1,000 years of Christendom before you could reach that point. And then it took another 1,000 years to outright eradicate it as a fixture within civilization in general.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the point here that should be understood is that it is the Christian faith that has led to this civilizational change, this dynamic changing, where people are saying, boy, I really wouldn't want to be owned by someone else and have no freedom and things like this. I think we should just stop doing it altogether. Right. That is not a natural impulse that human beings have, actually, to have to do the golden rule. Right. It takes an entire society for the leaven of the Christian faith to work its way through the entire loaf, where that would even be legible across a society.
Well, let me challenge this a little bit, because I'm gonna make this even more complicated, and I think it's important though. So what you just said was that, morally speaking, we've improved as a civilization, and therefore we were able to leave behind things like slavery. However, what we're assuming is a model of like liberal capitalism when you talk like that.
Yeah.
So let's take someone who's very controversial, but I think we can speak frankly about him, and that's R.L. Dabney.
Yes.
He was making an argument from the Golden Rule and from Christian charity and from Christian morality that, and look, maybe we disagree with him.
And Dabney is also a guy that
but
modern
maybe we
disagree
with him on this, but his argument was that because of these Africans were closer to the state of nature, they needed help civilizing. And so for him, again, it was an extension of the Golden Rule and Christian charity to recognize where the Americans found themselves, right? So he's not just, in fact, he's very specific in his Defense of Virginia book. He's very specific that what I'm not saying is that it's justifiable to go to Africa and capture slaves and bring them here. That's right. That's actually evil. He says that.
Yeah.
But we were born in a situation where Virginia had these institutions. And so what is the Christian thing to do, given these were the institutional and political dynamics at play here in the literal 19th century?
Yeah.
That's what he was asking. What is the Christian thing to do? Is it to give these people over to these revolutionaries. And if you know anything about the 19th century, there were Haitian revolutions. There were all types of third world revolutions going on where they were proto-communistic, they were anarchistic, they were influenced by all sorts of third world paganism, etc., barbarianism, etc. And he said, what is best for these people? And look, maybe we disagree with this, but the point is that there was an application of Christian charity to the paradigm in which they found themselves. What do you think about that?
No, I think that argument with
in other words, it's going to take a little bit of objectivity and not moral crusading to interpret our forebears in a charitable way.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's part of it too. Is 200 years from now, the things that we take as a given that are utterly monstrous, right? When you step outside yourself, right? Do we want our ancestors to view us as moral monsters, right? Because of particular practices that aren't even that we're not even conscious of, right? That very much that's part of it. I mean, some of it is like the interpreting history in terms of what was the context at the time, right? That's part of it. But his argument was a different application of
correct,
that he was making, but nevertheless, like he was sincere in how he viewed it.
Yeah. So let me turn the heat up on that.
Yeah.
So what he would say, people like him, Southerners in general, is they would look at the 21st century and the fact that everyone's depressed, everyone's in debt, people are struggling at minimum wage or slightly above it to even pay rent.
Yeah.
And they would say, how is that an application of Christian charity?
Yeah. How are things better?
Yeah.
Is what
we talk in terms of our moral progress, but they would look at the institutions and the power dynamics, the class dynamics. And yes, they did speak like this.
Yeah, they did.
And they would critique it and they would say, this is not a Christian way to run society.
Yeah.
And so like we kind of sit here, and I like the phrase chronological snobbery by C.S. Lewis. We sit here on our high horses and we critique these guys for not being enlightened enough to challenge the slavery institutions without looking inward enough.
Yeah.
Is this really the is this the moral zenith of human history right here?
Or and some of it too is to think through the question of, well, what is freedom? Right? What is freedom today? What was the 19th century view of freedom? Not just for people like Dabney, but even like abolitionists, right? How did they understand the concept of freedom? Like, what is a free man? What is a free man able to do? And for them, it was right. You were free to pursue whichever endeavors you personally choose to do, and free to provide for yourself and for your family and produce a future for your posterity. That was the conception that I think they would both share in terms of how do you view what is a free man? What does freedom look like? That is not something that is shared by us today, right? When you say, yeah, I believe in freedom, right? What does that look like? It means, I guess, to have as much totally sterile sex as you possibly can, to consume as much product as you possibly can, and I guess choose whatever servile employment you can possibly attain. Right. That's our conception of freedom today, where everything within our world is totally owned. Right. There's no like possibility for you to, especially within the American continent, to go out west, to lay claim to some land, to farm it and build it up and build something for your family. That is not, right. There is no frontier for us to explore and to claim. It's instead, right, a freedom to be a different kind of slave, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what our freedom
And
looks
that's
like
the
today.
critique that they would give to us.
Yes.
In fact, that was the critique that was given at the time,
Yeah.
because look, like you can disagree with his assumptions about the Africans that were here and all that, but really from his point of view, how was it better for them to mimic the industrial model of the North, where everybody had to take care of themselves? They were not given home or shelter. They really did have an anti-egalitarian view, anthropological paradigm that they were operating in. And I think that should soften our critique of them and help appreciate the problems that they were trying to solve within the context that they found themselves.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to bring up John Calhoun as well.
Yeah.
And
well, I think before we move on to Calhoun, I mean, I think this maybe is a good segue to Calhoun, but I've always, whenever I've discussed this issue, interpersonally with people, and the question I've always had for them is like, okay, well, you were the son of a wealthy Virginia plantation owner in 1840, and you personally have the view where, yeah, I think slavery is awful.
Mhm.
It's a repugnant thing to own other people, and seeing the things that would happen where families are separated, children from their parents, wives from husbands, and sold off, and
Mhm.
and things like that. I mean, I really like thinking about it. Like, if again, like you're within that, you were in that subordinate position, and if you personally are in it, right, it would be awful.
Mhm.
It would be horrible. It would be terrible. And you're seeing that, and you're thinking like, I just don't want to, live this way anymore.
Yeah.
I think this is absolutely monstrous. And so you've reached this this moral conclusion, right? And you're genuine about it. And your dad dies and you inherit the plantation.
Exactly.
What do you do?
What do you do?
Right? Because here are your range of options. You could let them all go free.
Mhm.
And now they have to fend for themselves
In a context that was, much harsher on them than they would be today.
Yes. Yeah, they have, even if you let them go free and you are able to give them, some money or whatever, what did they don't know how to read? They don't, have really any education whatsoever. And
other people had the right to lay claim to them.
yeah,
Capture them too.
People will take advantage, or at the very least, that could happen where people did do that, where they would, take free black people and and steal them.
Mhm.
But also they'd be taken advantage of, just being unleashed into society. So that's not a very good option. You could, and if you let them all go free, now you have a plantation that will cease to operate.
Mhm.
You'll go bankrupt. You have to liquidate it. Someone else will buy it and populate it full of slaves. So you're not going. You'll improve the situation for the few dozen people that you have, but it won't make any overall difference to the overarching institution. So you're like trapped within that kind of system, regardless, right? Whether you want to. So like and what I think many people did do when they had turned against the institution is they did that calculus, and they thought, well, I'm going to treat my slaves the best that I possibly can.
Right.
And I'm not going to sell off, husbands and wives and children and things like that. And I'm going to make sure that they are well fed and well cared for and everything else. And it's like, again, like people will look at that and think like, well, you're making excuses for these people. You're doing it, but it's like, well, what are you supposed to do in that situation? Right. If you actually do care about them and care about their welfare, what will happen to them? Right. It's not,
in other words,
there's no easy solution to it.
It's much easier to make that statement from the 21st century than
it is the comfort of it.
Than it is from their context. And, like this is one of the reasons I wanted to get to Calhoun, is because I think I really appreciate the fact that he had a politically realist view of slavery. And so he was dealing with these abolitionists, and he was trying to confront this spirit of sort of revolution, which, you know, he considered a very Jacobin. And so John Calhoun is a really great model of someone who thought through the actual political dynamics of slavery and the possibility of you know, how to leverage that as an institution in light of the political crises that were coming into play in the 1830s and 1840s. I think he's fascinating because people have forgotten how to think as political realists, as Machiavellians.
Yeah.
And in many ways, Calhoun was, you know, probably the most creative and intelligent, or at least original and creative political theorist that America ever had.
Yeah.
And so he was dealing from this perspective, not in terms of sin and righteousness and some of these, you know, things that we bring to the table, but he was very much dealing with it in terms of what is important for the state to think about in its attempt to preserve order. And in an attempt to preserve order, you have to look at things a little bit amoral.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard for Christians to do. And I know that you and I might have a little bit of disagreement on this, because I appreciate that Machiavellian approach more than others do. But I think that Calhoun recognized that pursuing an abolitionist agenda would have completely undermined the political stability of the nation.
Well, yeah, I mean,
And look, and this is hard, because what I'm saying is that political stability means more than the lives and well-being of these slaves. And what I'm actually saying is that politics is complicated.
Yes, it is.
And it's built within a paradigm of trade-offs. And you have to do what's best for everybody, because if you have these Jacobin tear it all down perspectives, you're going to hurt the very people your God has entrusted you with preserving and taking care of.
Yeah, I mean, the American South from, you know, 18 or really the 1790s to the start of the Civil War. One of the things that I think is, like, if I were going to if I were put in charge of American history curriculum for every child, they would all know about the Haitian Revolution, right? Because that was deep within the psyche of Southerners. That, hey, that could happen here, and I mean, maybe people listening to this many of them probably don't even know what happened there. Although you see it at like BLM marches, we did it in Haiti in 1803, and we'll do it here. But during the 1890s, after the French Revolution, they had a revolution of their own.
1790s.
1790s. And Haiti, the ratio of slaves to subjects of the French crown was way more skewed than it was in the South. And it was like 10-1, something like that. I don't know the figures off the top of my head, but it was there were way fewer white people there. And when the revolt began kicking off in the 1790s, it was vicious. I mean, they just slaughtered not only the white people, but also the half white people and the quarter white people. And like Haiti has remained, that way for the last 225 24 years. That it began with a racial revolution where they did a genocide of white people, and has been a very violent place ever since. And so that's in their heads.
Yes,
the entire time.
Specifically John Calhoun's head.
Yes,
and he would recognize the fact that, okay, we can live in the clouds, and we can have this idea of this utopia where we let them all go and they go and live their own free lives. But is that actually what's going to happen? Where are these people going? Who's influencing them? What's going to drive them? Because like you said, if they have difficult fitting in and assimilating into the structure of the 19th century in America, who's going to welcome them? Well, all these revolutionaries will.
Yeah.
and he recognized that as a legitimate threat that the government had to pay attention to, because it's part of the role of government to sustain order in society. And what happens is, if you release, and look, these are difficult conversations, but but from his perspective as the vice president and later as a senator, if you let these potential hundreds of thousands of militants into a group that has been radicalizing them, what is going to happen to the American society? And he had to think about this. And it's so easy to reject that.
Yeah, to think,
today.
well, yeah, that wouldn't happen. It's like, no, they were certain that was what was going to happen. And even like the precipitating cause of the American Civil War is John Brown going to Harper's Ferry. Like, he didn't just go there. I'm going to go free the slaves because I don't want to have slavery anymore. No, he was going there to start a slave revolt, like in Haiti. That was his goal.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, I want to set all these guys free. It was, no, I'm going to set them free and then they're going to kill everybody. Like, that was the point of the John Brown raid.
Yeah. And
everyone in the South at that point then thought, all right, oh, now we have Lincoln and he's going to do politically what John Brown sought to do through like subversive radical action.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because this is actually, and I don't want to get too far into Lincoln, but Lincoln actually recognized this Haitian adjacent threat as well. And so he had different ways of dealing with it. I mean, people think of, we're told again in grade school that Lincoln was this abolitionist utopian as well. And actually, no, he was very much a realist on these concerns as well. He had other solutions to dealing with what could have happened if there was a mass abolition. So he had his own mechanisms of dealing with that as well. But this was a real threat that these Southerners and these Northerners were trying to wade through. And obviously more like morality and ethics kind of came into the equation a little bit. But people like a Calhoun, I think, emphasized in a very healthy way, in a way that we could probably learn from, how to deal realistically with real world situations.
What would your answer be to the objection, though? Is like, well, we did free the slaves and there wasn't a Haitian style revolution, so we should have done it in 1820.
Well, first of all, he didn't actually, like, this is always the myth, right? Because what he did is he declared that the slaves.
Well,
yeah. So he didn't actually.
But the 13th Amendment did, and there wasn't a wholesale slaughter of like every white person in the South like there was in Haiti.
Yeah, they shorted up, but like from Calhoun's perspective, that wasn't a given. It's easy. Like, this is easy from
After
our
the fact, in
vantage point.
hindsight,
He should have listened to us. Yeah. But it's not that easy from the vantage point when you're in the mix of the situation. Yeah. And so that's what I would say. From the 21st century, Calhoun, his prediction may have been wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, but we still have to deal with his actual arguments.
And what their fears were.
Yeah, and we can't just turn them into School of Rock interpretations of what was going on in the 19th century.
Yeah. Schoolhouse Rock, School of Rock.
That's true. Yes.
Jack Black movie.
Well, we shouldn't do that either.
Yeah. You could sing it if you want. But yeah, I think again, like, so much of this is a subject where we want to apply the moral standards of the 21st century to all of human history, and what we see in America is that it inherited the ways of life that had preceded it.
Mm-hmm.
And continued them on until it didn't anymore. Right. And yeah, I think getting into the subject, I mean, we got into it a little bit, but just the subject of being able to conceptualize life without owning other human beings, and what changed where people were able to. I mean, this is always a subject that. Another one that is fascinating to me is that people, they individually and in general, in terms of a society, right? They only know the things that they know, right? They're fish in water, right? They can't know, oh, it actually should be this way, right? And this was something that I think you start to sort of understand, or at least I did. Back in my libertarian days, where it's like, well, we could have a society where the government didn't have to build the roads, and wouldn't that be great, right? If everyone could just understand that it would be way more efficient if all the roads and bridges and highways and everything were private, and the government didn't have to do it. But like, for one, like, people can't conceptualize, at least at scale, a world like that.
Well, it's like today when Trump
know?
says that we're going to, go after people, illegals picking vegetables or whatever in California. And the entire argument is, okay, well, then we're all going to starve to death.
Yeah. How are you ever going to have strawberries again?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's the same thing. It's like,
Yeah.
People can respond. Institutions can respond to changing situations.
Yeah,
and no one has to admit that because
Yeah.
we are committed to what we know best and the way things are.
Yeah. But I mean, part of it is like, things don't change until they do, until, not to sound too Hegelian, but until the historical process moves along. Right. And this is what happened, is this confluence of various factors, whether it be, political ideology and the philosophy that undergirded it, within modernism, within liberalism, not liberalism as we understand it today, but just, simply the idea of a liberal republic, and Enlightenment individualism and so forth. That begins working its way through society. Meanwhile, you have drastic and rapid economic and technological development, where now machines are able to multiply human labor at a scale that had never been seen before in human history.
Right.
Where, I mean, that's part of the, I mean, some of it is, people, if they've made it, this far, asking the question, well, why was it a fixture of human civilization for all time to own people to do work for you? It's because for most of human history, survival, like you're on the knife's edge of survival, right? Whether you're a farmer, it's like subsistence farming. You're barely making it, you're growing enough or raising enough food to feed your family. And then any larger groups, right? Tribes and clans and kingdoms and so forth begin operating at a larger scale. Right? Anything that you intend to do requires a massive amount of labor, a massive amount, and you don't have machines to do anything. You need people. You need human beings to do it, and that's why, right? That the amount of labor to produce things, especially physical labor, like hard labor, things like mining or lots of various kinds of construction that are backbreaking labor that was done. Right? That was employed by these civilization employed slaves to do that. And we, again, we don't want to think about that. We think of it as horrible and repugnant, but this is what was done, right? And this is how human beings lived for millennia. And only with the advent of all of these things taking place in the 18th and 19th centuries, and only in the specific places that it did,
right,
within
the Anglosphere and
within Western Christendom, that it was even conceivable to begin stopping that, because after Western countries eradicated slavery, right, it still continued on in much of the rest of the world.
Well, another thing that people don't want to talk about either
today
is there's more slaves today in Asia and in the Arab world than there ever was in Christendom.
Yeah,
that's important to bring up too, because who's the only people that get blamed for this all the time? It's us.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's. I mean, even now, like today, right? You think about, and some of it is like the sort of crossover you already mentioned with the immigration issue, right? I mean, I'm sure you saw the speech by Tom Homan where they're like, yeah, we found while doing all these raids, we found like 3,600 children in Minnesota, and like, what are they doing with these kids? Right? They're keeping them as sex slaves, And like that didn't even register. It doesn't even make a blip. But it's like, well, that's still ongoing
Yeah.
throughout much of the third world. That people, little kids, are owned for people to pimp them out and make money, for other people to have sex with them. Like that is something that is happening, and it's widespread.
Mhm.
And no one even talks about that or thinks about that. But it's like, oh well, because America had slavery, it's the most evil place in the world. Meanwhile, right, sex slavery is rampant all over the world, like still, and we're supposed to destroy our entire civilization because
exactly.
200 years ago we had slaves, right?
Mhm.
It's absurd. And so, yeah, I think I do think though, it often gets overstated, like the Christian influence of ending slavery, but it's certainly there,
Mhm.
right? And I wasn't trying to overstate the case earlier, but that's a factor as well.
Yeah.
Where people are looking at like I wouldn't, and I look at it myself, like I wouldn't want even if the scenario happens that like Gary wants to have, where like civilization collapses, we're reduced to like Iron Age, technology and ways of life, and I am a warlord running my small kingdom,
Mhm.
right? Even then, I still wouldn't want to be like, yeah, let's go raid the people next door because I need people to do farm labor for me, right? I wouldn't want to do that. I couldn't do it. And maybe I'm a bad warlord in this dystopian scenario, but I wouldn't want to. But then there again, right? If we do have this like massive catabolic collapse that like half of Twitter wants to happen because they think they will be the warlord and not the slave,
Including Gary.
odds are it's not going to work out how you think. But if that were to happen, right, slavery's back.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's what would like the civilizational conditions which allowed for the end of it would no longer exist. Exactly. And it would immediately resume as if the last 200 years had never happened. Mm-hmm. It's one reason why I don't want a collapse of civilization. Mm-hmm. Actually, I like not being a slave because I feel like I probably would be one if that happens. That's probably what would happen to me, and I don't want that for me or for my kids or for anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd be kind to you.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Thank you. You would still be a Christian. You would still, read, Ephesians chapter 6 and you would treat me well. That's good. Thank you. Well, anything else on this?
No, I think we should kind of go back and like summarize some of our points. I think one of the most important points is that like when we address these issues, we are not trying to recreate utopia. And we're not saying that slavery was this good that we need to bring back because society is better that way.
If only we still had it.
Obviously, right? That's not it.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, it's an inappropriate use of political morality to go back and beat the heads of our forebears because of our superiority. And I think that's one of the things that people have a hard time with is it is okay to defend your ancestors when they're being attacked by people who want to liquidate your heritage. That's okay.
Yeah.
And just because today's public morality says that anyone who ever engaged in slaveholding is an irredeemable sinner, that doesn't mean that they need to be left undefended. We can look at people like Robert E. Lee and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and say, these are men that we can aspire to model ourselves after.
Yeah.
They are good men. And I think that's the important. We don't need to say, okay, they were good, but they did this evil sin.
They also owned slaves. So they guess it's again, mixed bag. It's like, well, like that was a fixture of civilization at that moment.
Yes.
Right? That was part of the world that everyone lived in.
Mhm.
right? And again, like it's and almost an accident of history that we don't have it.
Let me say
today.
it like this: a man should be judged more by how he treated his slaves than whether or not he inherited them.
Yeah.
I think that's a better standard
Yeah.
of judging these men.
Yeah, I think so. But also, again, like history is way more complex than people want to treat it. They don't want to. They don't want to treat it like adults. They want to treat it like children watching a Marvel movie.
Mhm.
Right. That's honestly the biggest problem is we want it to be reduced down to these very simple things. These are the good guys and these are the bad guys.
Exactly.
When
Yeah.
when things are much more gray than anyone wants to admit,
Mhm.
and that yeah, that we would like I guess yeah, like my is it a counterfactual scenario if it hasn't happened yet, or a potential future, right? Where you no longer have industrial society or post-industrial society, technological society.
Gary's drooling over there.
Yeah, it's like you would reach the exact same conditions immediately, and then now what do you do?
Mhm.
Right now what happens? I think people should understand that it's something that is very fragile. Like the civilization that we currently have is incredibly fragile, and if it's not sustained, we would revert to the same social and moral and every other feature of the rest of human history. It's probably right to look at the last several hundred years as not necessarily like as a blip within the historical record, but rather, right, this is only possible because we have the civilization that we have. We have advanced, economically and technologically, and in terms of and in terms of like the technology of governance, to this point,
Mhm.
and then it's not without its own moral downsides.
Well, let me say too, there's this myth of a noble savage kind of argument that is made about like the third world and all of that. And I believe
Yeah.
that if we don't reverse the immigration stuff, part of what happens in bringing in these pre-Christian cultures, these non-Christian cultures, is we're actually going to see a heightening of things like slavery.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they are prevalent throughout the second and third worlds. And so slavery could actually become a bigger part of our life, everyday life, if we don't re-Christianize.
Yeah, I think if we reach a point, this is the sort of the nightmare scenario, but where Americans become 20% of the population of America, and the rest of it is people from China and India and then third world places. Yeah, that
Yeah.
it would be there would be no moral compunction for them to like own other people.
Because the slave trade over there right now is massive.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's huge.
No, absolutely it is. And so you can imagine a scenario where it just becomes common
Yes.
within the present country that we have right now, even with all the technology and a very advanced economy. It could easily devolve into that.
Yeah.
And so part of it is, right, unless we maintain the civilization we have as we have it and have had it historically, right, it could go back to that
It's
quickly.
one of the ironies and tensions of liberalism, that liberalism is only possible within that civilization.
Yeah.
And if you open it up and universalize liberalism, you actually lose your you lose your
You
liberties.
will lose it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think I'm good with that. I mean, just
Yeah.
to summarize, I don't think we can say that slaveholders are necessarily sinful. I don't think that the Bible treats it like that. I also don't think that we can abuse our ancestors by weaponizing slavery against them. And also, we need to push back against the guilt manipulation of
Yeah.
ourselves today, right now, because
Yeah.
slavery is used
Yeah.
as a bludgeon to
Oh, yeah.
make us feel bad and to give away our treasure, to give away our inheritance, and to basically just disappear into the night. And that's
Yeah.
what they want from us. And that's the purpose of bringing up slavery right now.
Well, it is. It's like, well, yeah, even when you make like a constitutional argument, right? What do? They say, well, that document was written by slaveholders.
Exactly. Yes.
It's written by slaveholders,
Mhm.
right? This and so the very foundations of the country are undermined when we
Yes.
allow the guilt manipulation over this, right? It was the slaveholders that did it. They built everything, and they built it in such a way that it only benefit white people,
Mhm.
and all those kinds of all those arguments that they make. And it's like, no, you should just dismiss that completely, like just literally not care, right? Never ever let these people have the moral high ground. Right? That is, if there's one thing that anyone can learn, like these are people, like, these are sick people, and you're going to cede the moral high ground to them on anything, right? Anything at all, right? No, never let them do that. Because like, what is their goal? Like their goal is the destruction and eradication of our country, of our way of life, of our history, of our heritage, of us.